All right. Hello, hello, hello. Peace and blessings to all of you out there. If you don't mind, let me know if you can hear me. Just let me know in the chat. Hopefully, all is well with you all. This is your host, Rebounds or Reebs, and I am back at it again with another live stream. So I'll go ahead and wait on you all to see if you can hear me quite fine. I want to make sure that there's no delay or I don't sound like a chipmunk. But yes, peace and blessings to all of you out there. Hopefully, you all are enjoying your beautiful Sunday day, afternoon, or evening. Some of you may even be entering on Monday. So let's see here. I'm just waiting for some comments to see. Okay, so it looks like you all can hear me. 1 second. All right. So it's so nice to have all of you here. What I wanted to do is, for those of you who know, I wanted to go ahead and, kind of strengthen my relationship with the Most High. And by doing that, I wanted to go ahead and reread the Bible, right? So, a lot of us who are Bible believers, we have kind of skimmed through the Bible, or we've maybe read the Gospels, and we kind of left the Old Testament alone. And so, what I've decided is, I want to start the Bible from the beginning, right? I want to start the Bible from the beginning and see what exactly is the book talking about. And for those of you who are new to the channel or who are going to watch the playback in the past, or I guess you can say the playback in the future, once again, I go by the name Rebound. Um, Here on this channel, we talk a lot about recovering from narcissistic abuse and spreading that type of awareness. And so on this path of understanding, that narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder was a spiritual disorder, then I began to understand that this was spiritual warfare that, a lot of us in this reality are going through. And I do believe that this spirit is manifesting and we're starting to see its ugly face. Um, and so in the beginning of the channel, I really just discussed my findings when it came to dealing with these entities. And I really, I wanted to bring it on online to see if anybody was having the same experience as I was. And to my surprise, there's many of us out here who endure this type of warfare, right? No matter whether it's in our families, no matter whether it's in our workplace, for individuals that we date, it just seems like the more boundaries that you set, Satan finds a way to get his his hands on you, right? And so and because this spirit is manifesting, this is where we get into concepts such as gang stalking, and the likes of, right? So the noise campaign, um, and all the other tactics that the enemy uses. And so I think now with everything that's going on with the world, now's the time to really get to what's important, right? And there are so many false prophets out there, whether they know it or not. And it's very important for those of us who are Bible believers to read the book ourselves. And so that's what I wanted to do. I do believe that we do have the mindset to try to figure out what these stories are alluding to, uh, and, decipher it, as we go along. And so let's see, how can I start this? So I guess we can kind of start with a testimony, as I kind of warm up here. So for those of you who know, or don't know, my childhood was, I guess you can say in short terms, it was ridiculous, right? So I went through a lot of hardships. I went through a lot of physical warfare, emotional warfare, mental and spiritual. And, I believe that the reason why I went through this was because there was a calling on my life. And, I'm in the process now of trying to figure it out. Right. And I believe, with every hardship or with every um, unfortunate event that occurred in my life, this not only strengthened my relationship with the creator, but it helped open my eyes to the true reality that we live in. And so I believe that the devil has temporary control over this world, and he's created this antichrist system or this beast system. Some liken it to the matrix. And so the goal is for us to be so bombarded and so distracted and busy with our day-to-day lives that we don't look towards the creator, and thus die without forming a relationship with him. And so during the times of the last days, there is a tremendous amount of deception, right? So we have many antichrists popping up. We also have many arms, or I guess you could say many religious institutions who don't really have the scriptures right. And so this is why we have to take accountability to really try to study this stuff on our own. So let's see. Let me see who's in the chat. Shout out to all of you. It is so funny when I take a break from here, how you kind of have to warm up into things. And so what I'm going to do is every time I complete a book of the Bible, I'll get on here and I'll kind of give my point of view on it. And then for those of you who are not in the faith, maybe these stories can encourage you to build your relationship with the creator, right? And I do believe that we had a relationship with the creator before coming here, and now we're kind of in the wilderness and trying to find our way back to the Father. All right, so as you can see from the title of this video, I liken the book of Genesis to the beginning of humanity's love story with the Father. Right. So in the book of Genesis, there are several stories. The book is about 50 chapters long, and there is so much to learn from it. So we have the story of creation, where God created the moons, the stars, the animals. And, finally, it comes down to the story of Adam and Eve. And what you will notice in the book of Genesis is how there seems to be some sort of timeline that follows a certain genetic lineage. And so I do believe that paying attention to this, the writer is trying to pretty much allow the reader to understand that there's a deeper meaning to it, right? So not only does the Bible have very symbolic meanings and very literal meanings, but there's also multiple lessons and stories being told in the various chapters. So let's see here. I'm just going to go ahead and kind of highlight a few of the stories, and then we can go ahead and do an after show. So I don't know how long I'll be on here today, but I just want to hang out with you all, and I guess we can have a little bit of a discussion on, once again, the book of Genesis. All right, so we have the story of creation, right? So we have the story of Adam and Eve and the fall of mankind, right? So this is where we get the serpent, and the serpent comes in, deceives Eve, and then from there, Adam takes the fall, and now we are out of alignment with the creator. And from there, two sons are born, and so we have the story of Cain and Abel. And Cain is jealous of his brother, ends up killing his brother, and then from there, God creates another son by the name of Seth, and to keep this lineage going on, right? So now we see Cain being the first murderer in the Bible. It's least likely that God's line will be coming down from him. So now we have Seth, and from Seth we have various descendants come, and then so the book of Genesis highlights the story of Noah and the flood. So during this time, the world was contaminated, right? So our human gene pool was contaminated, and the book talks a lot about the Nephilim and the fallen angels. And so we see wickedness, really manifesting all throughout this world, kind of similar to what we see now. And God had to correct the situation, right? So this is where you get Noah and his ark. And then you have a great flood. And what's interesting about this flood is many religions or cultures allude to this flood in all parts of the world. And honestly, you can almost argue that the dragon in the book of Revelation, when he spews the water at the woman, we can argue that that's symbolic of this great flood. But from there, Noah has 3 kids, right? So he goes through the flood and he comes out and he has 3 kids by the name of Japheth, Shem, and Ham. And from there, the lineage is going to grow. And then we get the story of Abraham, right? And before Abraham comes into the picture, or during that time, we also have the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. So once again, this wickedness is still manifesting, right? Man trying to become God, man both embodying the forces of good and evil. And what's very unfortunate about evil is it knows no limits. And because mankind was influenced by the fallen angels or the Nephilim, this is when man runs into a lot of trouble, right? And also, we have the story of the Tower of Babel, where mankind, it looks as if mankind was trying to tap into some other type of dimension. And this is where God spread out the tongue of the nations, right? So by doing this and dispersing mankind via their various languages, then this stopped mankind trying to achieve, I guess you can say, this sense of godhood, which is a theme we see all throughout history. But let me go ahead and get back to the story. So Abraham gives birth to Isaac, and Isaac has 2 sons. And he has 2 sons by the name of Esau and Jacob. And so, it's an opinion of mine that Esau, some way or another, he had Nephilim DNA. So he came out the womb with red hair pretty much all over his body. And so once again, you have this story of brothers, of, a brother who chooses to side with evil versus a brother who chooses to side with good. And there's this type of dysfunction between the brothers, right? So once again, the Bible, it covers the theme of envy and jealousy. And from there, the 2 brothers separate, right? So there's a lot of drama between them, but pretty much before the brothers were born, it was prophesied that one of the brothers would take leadership, and it would be the youngest brother, which kind of goes against the traditions during that time, because typically it was the eldest brother that took on the leadership, right? And basically, Jacob got Esau to sell his birthright. And so Esau sells his birthright. And Isaac, at the time, who is the father of the 2, he is, I guess you can say, his vision isn't as clear, like physical vision isn't as clear. And so, it's getting close to the time of his death. And so what happens is he wants to go ahead and bless the eldest of the 2. Now, his wife overhears this, and she convinces Jacob to disguise himself as his brother. And so accidentally, Isaac blesses Jacob instead of Esau. So you can see why Esau would be so angry with Jacob. And then from there, Jacob, he has 12 children. And then this is where you get the various tribes of Israel. And then also Jacob's name was changed to Israel. So we see, it seems, to me, when God makes a pact with his people, their name changes. So we saw this with Abraham, and I believe there was someone else. But anyway, so now we have these 12 tribes, and we get into the story of these brothers, right? And so once again, it seems, before I get into the story of the brothers, there seems to be something that is important about this genetic code, right? So we go from Seth, who passes the baton to Noah, who passes the baton to Lot, Abraham, and then from Abraham, it's Isaac, and then now it's Jacob, who's also known as Israel. So once again, he will be the line. And I'm theorizing that this is a line that the Messiah will come out of, right? So let's see where we stopped off at. So we have the story of these 12 brothers, right? And what happens is there's favor within one of the brothers by the name of Joseph, right? And I do believe, going back to the topic of narcissism, Joseph would be likened to what we would call the empath, right? So you could definitely see that Joseph had a lot of empathetic traits. He was a very compassionate man. You could argue that he had the gift of uh, interpreting dreams. He also was kind of, in my opinion, he was likened to kind of an accountant, right? So he definitely had a very great skill set. But what happens is he has this prophetic dream, and pretty much God tells him in this dream that he is going to be in charge of his brothers, right? And I want to kind of want to go ahead and backtrack, but I guess what I'll do is I'll go ahead and continue the story, and then we'll backtrack between the relationship between Jacob and Esau, because I do believe we're seeing that today, right? So this Esau spirit is something that is definitely manifesting. But pretty much, so Joseph tells his brother of this dream that he has, and so his brothers become envious. So I want to say 10 of his brothers become envious. One was too young to know what was going on. And also what's important is you'll find out that these brothers are not full brothers, right? So it's 12 women. It's 4 women that give birth to these brothers. So we have a few siblings who are actually full brothers, and then we have some that aren't. But there was something special about the last 2 children that Jacob gave birth to, right? And this was because there was a woman of his life, a woman who was the love of his life, and her name was Rachel. And she gave birth on her last son, his youngest son. She actually died while giving birth. And so these 2 boys, something was very special about them because they were the descendants of the love of his life. And let's see, from there, the brothers become jealous of Joseph because of this dream. And so what they do is they plot to kill him. Of course, that's extreme, right? But they plot to kill him. And another brother steps in and he says, okay, well, instead of killing him so that we don't have blood in our hands, how about we sell him into slavery, right? And so Joseph is sold into slavery. And from there, he is taken into the land of Egypt, and he becomes a servant to the Pharaoh. And then from there, we have the story of this Jezebel spirit. I think this is the first Jezebel that the Bible talks about. It may not be, but I know that it's one of the first, right? So we have the wife of the Pharaoh who wants to sleep with Joseph, and so Joseph denies it, and she keeps pursuing him. And it looks as if, while he was undressing, she finds him. And, this is just my interpretation. It may not be exactly correct, but she finds him, and she still tries to pursue him, and he flees, right? But now she has his clothes, and so she takes it to her husband and says, hey, he tried to RAPE me. And from there, Joseph is put in prison, right? So I guess, she was like, well, if you don't give me what I want, I'm going to destroy your life. But whatever, God can use evil for good. And so pretty much Joseph was in prison. And from there, he found the guards found favor in him. And I think it was through divine intervention. And so he begins to interpret their dreams. The king eventually has a dream. And so one of the guards is like, hey, Joseph is actually really good at interpreting dreams. And so the Pharaoh brings Joseph in. Joseph talks about the famine that's coming in the land. So they're going to have 7 years of, abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. And so Joseph lets him know what this dream means. And so now Joseph has, some type of, Egyptian leadership. power, I guess you can say. And now here's where the story gets good, right? So pretty much um, they all go through this period of abundance, right? So there's abundance in the land, the livestock is growing, the agriculture is growing, and so what happens is once the nation hits this famine period, Joseph's brothers, the same ones who sold him into slavery, they come into the land of Egypt begging for food or asking for food. And so Joseph recognizes his brothers, but his brothers doesn't recognize him. And so from there, there's this feast. From there, he shows compassion to his brothers. And he asked to see his youngest brother, or I guess you can say his full brother. And they go back and see him. And then from there, Joseph allows them to know who he really is. And the dad finds out that Joseph is alive. And so the dad sees him and they move, into a land that's closer to Joseph. And the father, by the name of Jacob, whose names was changed to Israel, he goes ahead and he prophesies of what's going to happen with these 12 brothers who are the 12 tribes, right? And so he meets Joseph's sons, and Joseph has two sons. And so it looks as if there's a blessings for both sons. But the youngest son is by the name of Ephraim. And so Israel blesses that son because there's something special about this son. And I want to say from there, the story ends. Oh, and then from there, actually, so the father ends up passing away. And then later on down the road, Joseph ends up passing away. And this is right before you get into the book of Exodus, right? But what's very interesting about, the Bible is, once again, there's this lineage, right? So the lineage goes from Joseph, right? And now the baton is passed on to Ephraim. And I do believe that there is something very significant with this line, right? So if the Bible is a historical heirloom, if it's a story between a chosen people and the father, I do believe that paying attention to these bloodlines is very important, right? So Genesis starts off with a bloodline, and then which is of the Old Testament, and then the New Testament starts off with a bloodline, and we see this in the book of Matthew. And I believe if we pay attention to the things that the Old Testament is saying, then we'll be able to crack the code when it comes to the New Testament, and therefore figure out the prophetic timelines, especially since we are living in, I guess you can say, perilous times now. But there, it seems to be, in this story. So I guess you can say with the story of the 12 tribes, right? So these are going to be the tribes that we talk about today. So we have the tribes of Judah, and then we also have the tribes of Israel. And so all throughout the Bible is focused on these 12 tribes because they are a part of God's chosen people. And once again, I do believe that it's important to pay attention to these tribes to see, I guess you can say, to gather the lessons that God wants humanity to gather. Let's see. And then, it was, you have many themes in the book of Genesis, right? So the theme of familial rivalry, you have the theme of restoring family connection, right? There's also the theme of forgiveness, right? So Joseph forgiving his brothers for betraying him, right? And once again, it's, this is the first time in my life where I've actually have seen the beauty in reading the Bible, right? And for those of you who want to know what version I'm reading, it's going to be the ESV version. So this translation is a little easier to read than the King James translation. But once again, it's a beautiful story, right? And when Joseph is sold into slavery, right? into Egypt, we can argue that there's those of us. So the story is, it's almost as if it's telling us, predicting a story within the future. So there's nothing new under the sun. And so just like Joseph was betrayed and sold into slavery, I do believe that there's those of us in this time who are in the land of our captors, right? Or who are in captivity. And, from there, it's very important to hold on to our faith, right? Because once again, like even, in times that we are seeing now, there's so much that's going on, right? So we have this idea of the mark of the beast that is manifesting, wars and rumors of wars, and kind of backtracking a little bit. It's very interesting when you look at the relationship between Esau and Jacob, right? So there was always some type of disdain between the two, and um, it was almost as if one brother wanted to kill the other. And here on the channel where we talk about narcissism, right? That spiritual compromise that somebody is dealing with. One of the characteristics, or a few of the characteristics, is this perpetual jealousy and envy, which can really be dangerous, right? And so, what's interesting is we see the same behavior, in the beginning of time, right? And so, where is this coming from? Who is this influenced by, right? And it's, it's, I guess you can just say it's an interesting thing, especially when it comes from two siblings, right? Because sibling rivalry is something that, a lot of us dealt with, right, growing up. So what I'm doing now is I'm just looking back at the chapters to see. Oh, okay. So this is what I wanted to talk about. So we have this spirit, right? So we have Jacob, which is representative of the 12 tribes. So the house of Judah and the house of Israel. And so I do believe that these tribes are very important to look at, as we have descendants from those tribes here today. But with that, we also have descendants of Esau, right? And I do believe that Esau mixed in with the Nephilim in the land of, I would say Canaan, but I'm not sure. So it's somewhere in the mountains, right? And so there's a battle between these two forces, one representing good and the other representing evil. And so we have this spirit, right, of Esau, that our Edom, that is so toxic, it's so devouring. And what's interesting is Esau's father, who I believe his name was Isaac, he prophesied that Esau would pretty much. So first off, Esau sold his birthright, right? So I believe they forfeited their spot when it comes to the afterlife, right, or heaven. But what's also interesting is he said pretty much Esau will live and die by the sword. And so you see this spirit manifesting all throughout these various empires, right? So even in the book of Genesis, Esau already had an empire of about 400 people, right? Very powerful empire. And so from there, that gives birth to the Greek and Romans, or the Greco-Roman empires, who pretty much take everything by sword, right? And then from there, that evolves into so let me start over. So it's the Egyptian and Babylonian empires, and then you have the Greco-Roman influence that tied in with the Roman Catholic Church. And then you have the military industrial complex, which is what we see today. And so we have that same bullying like spirit destroying the world, right? And so this could be very symbolic of the harlot, or of the dragon, right? And, it seems when one nation, or when one brother is in power, the other brother isn't, right? So it almost reminds me of the yin and the yang symbol, right? So you have the battles between good versus evil. And so when one nation is on top, or like, I guess you can say when the descendants of the devil is on top, then the descendants of God is on the bottom. And throughout biblical history, we see this flipping of, when one nation rises to power, the other nation falls. And typically with the this spirit of Esau, everything that they create implodes. And and the system has to constantly reset, right? And also there's always scapegoats that these various systems or institutions have to feed off of. And I do believe this is why we're seeing a new system emerge, right? So some call it the fourth industrial um, the fourth industrial, what is it, revolution? I could be wrong, but we see this digital age of really tying everybody in, linking everybody in to this new system. And really, it's pretty much the devil's last tactic to really get those of us to submit, ultimately submitting to evil and forfeiting our birthrights and, our morals and integrity. And, one thing that I really do enjoy about the Bible is it gives us this moral responsibility, right? So it allows us to take ownership of the various things that we do in our lives, right? And we have an objective, we have a blueprint, a guideline to follow when it comes to, um, issues concerning morality. And so the Bible is huge on various commandments, laws, and holy days, right, in which God's people are to follow. And I do believe that over time we've been pulled away from that, and we no longer feel that these things are important. And we live in a society that has thrown morality, has flushed it down the toilet, I guess you can say. And we have this very narcissistic, self-centered, wicked generation, and we don't value each other because we don't value ourselves. Or I guess you can say the fallen state of mankind doesn't value themselves, and therefore they don't value each other. And so this is why we see so many issues in society. So it's very important for those of us in the light to come back to it, to come back to the God that is within us, or to God's laws and to God's moral grounds, to have an ethic code about us to keep us from, just to give our lives some structure, right? So, I found that really, really, really fascinating. And let's see here. So, as you all know, I've been doing a lot of research, right? So, right now we're living in what we would call the Great Deception. And so, to my surprise, is the church is actually, in my opinion, I do believe that the church is actually a part of the Grand Deception. And not to say that the Bible isn't true, because I do believe that is true, but I do believe that the Bible has been compromised as far as it's been given to the hands of the enemy, and the enemy is therefore trying to break down the scriptures. And I do believe a lot of their teachings are misguided, right? And when when it comes to reading these various books, as far as trying to understand who the descendants of slaves were, so it is of my opinion that the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade were Hebrew in origin. And so this is why there was an attack, right? So as we mentioned earlier, there's a spirit of Esau, and Esau is doing everything in his power to dominate his brother Jacob, which are going to be the descendants of Abraham, right? So this is a prophecy that God gave to Abraham. Abraham gave it to Isaac. Isaac gave it to Joseph, right? And so in this prophecy, it says that your descendants will be of all nations, so scattered all across the world. And Esau is doing everything in its power to disrupt that system. And so within that system, I do believe that the Roman Catholic Church is huge. So it is the whore that sits on many waters, and its influence really has taken over the world, right? And from there, you have a branch of Christianity, right? So this is why when you look at the symbolism between the Christian church and the Catholic church, it is quite similar, right? So we have this image of the cross, which when you understand some of the things that both the Christian and Catholic church has done to the Judean people, you'll realize that these are a branch of the devil. And so for those of us who are far removed from this history, it is important to understand what these institutions or political institutions, religious political institutions, what they were doing to God's chosen people, to understand their true origin. And therefore um, you're not deceived by their doctrine, right? And I feel like now is really a time to really bring that out, because I liken this deception is going to be a byproduct of the great dragon that the book of Revelation speaks of, right? And so you have this Esau-like spirit promoting this false doctrine, but also promoting devastation all around the globe, right? And a lot of us who stand for truth, a lot of us now during this time were silenced, or the world tries to do everything in its power to silence us. And so it's important not to be silenced and to spread this information, and to try, as I go through and read various books of the Bible, I'm going to bring the information that I find to the channel, because I do believe that there is a hidden code within the Bible. And so when you read certain books such as Genesis, this is going to help unlock the code when it comes to understanding the book of Revelation, right? So even going back to this lineage, I do believe that I haven't read it yet, but I do believe that the Messiah is actually going to come out of the line of Ephraim. And once again, well, before the Messiah comes out, it's going to be the line of David. And then it's going to be the line of Joseph, then the Messiah, right? And I do believe that the Messiah comes in and he is representative of these 12 houses, of these 12 tribes uniting, because I do believe that he comes from both the tribe of Judah and the tribes of Israel. And so pretty much going back to this love story, the Lord knows that we are born into sin. And so therefore, he had to create a great sacrifice to save us, right? And so this is where the Messiah comes in, and the Messiah's job is to really show us how to live out God's word, right? And so the Messiah was an example of just that. And from there, you had the Messiah who was betrayed by his own people, and he was given over to the Romans and was crucified. And from there, I guess you can say, the Judean people, or the tribes of Judah, was cursed. And this is a theory of mine. And, there's this battle of really trying to get back in God's good graces and, falling off, right? And so you have, as we talked in the last show, you have this time where the Messiah was down here, he reigned, he was crucified. And then from there, we have the works of Josephus, who is going to be a Jewish historian. And so I'm going to do that research and bring it to the channel as well, where pretty much there was a period of time where you had the Jewish people, or the people of Judah, or the people who practice God's law, merging with another group of people who would be the Moors. And so these are people who celebrated or studied the nation of Islam, right? So they're Islamic as faith. And as I said in the last show, these two groups joined forces, because I do believe that they are related to each other. I believe that they're both descendants of Shem, so one of Noah's sons. So they joined forces and they end up, conquering Spain and living amongst Spain for about 800 years. And then from there, they were cast out. And when you look at some of the things that the Christian church was doing. It was horrible, right? So burning these members on Sundays, um, forcing them to convert over to Christianity, taking their kids and sending them to an island, right? So a lot of people will argue, well, why didn't the slaves from the transatlantic slave trades, why didn't they fight back? But a lot of these slaves were children. They were under the age of 30, right? And you could even argue some of them were under the age of 14. And so for those of us who grew up in narcissistic families, we know that abusers are really great at brainwashing and manipulating children. If you can get a child to become codependent, you can control them as an adult because they'll have the same type of behaviors. But then, okay, so we go to the Jewish people are banished to, or the descendants of Judah are banished to the West, right? The West Africa. And then from there, we have the transatlantic slave trade, which, that's from, in some nations it started at 1501, and then other nations it started in 1619. And then you fast forward, and then you have the times that we're living in today. And so I do believe that there is going to be, if not already occurring, a mass awakening of this bloodline. And this is going to help bring in biblical prophecy. So this is where we get to learning about the two witnesses in the book of Revelation. So this is going to be an awareness of those descendants coming back to who they are, and therefore sharing that information with the world. And the world thought that they were dead, but these two individuals come back to life. And so I do believe that that's covering, in a spiritual way, it's covering where the various nations of Israel forgot who they were, and so now they're coming back into this awareness. So when it comes to studying the Bible from this angle, it's pretty interesting. It's very interesting. I do believe that it helps unlock so many of the scriptures, because being somebody who grew up in the church, I never really saw the biblical prophecies from this angle, right? And I was always told that the woman in the book of Revelation, who was pretty much battling it out with the dragon, is the church, but I don't believe so. I believe that the woman is symbolic of a nation of people, right? And so when she talks about having the 12 stars over her head, these are going to be once again referring to the various 12 tribes. And of course, from this nation comes out the Messiah, so the man child in the book of Revelation. And so, of course, the dragon tries to devour this child, and the child is caught up. So I do believe that this is going to refer to the crucifixion of Yeshua. And once again, now the dragon goes after the woman, who is going to be the descendants, over a huge period of time, of the various tribes of Israel. And so what's interesting is the dragon spews out water. And from there, he tries to devour the woman, but the earth, Mother Earth, opens herself up to consume the water. And I do believe that this is just a theory of mine, but I do believe that is representative of the transatlantic slave trade. So even though a lot of the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade had it bad once they arrived to the various nations within the New World, when you go back and you study what happened in Spain and Portugal, you see, and in West Africa, you see that the Judean people had it a whole lot worse, pretty much being burned at the stake, raped, killed. It's pretty gruesome. And when it comes to really looking at this history, because a lot has been tampered with, I've noticed just within my research that a lot of the books really cover the true identity of the Judean people when it's written in the 1800s or earlier, right? So there's something that went on in the 1900s that really does hide this history. And so a lot of various people who are waking up claiming to be of these 12 tribes, we're starting to find patterns within our DNA. And then once again, there's also historical patterns going back to the 1800s. So it's a very interesting thing to uh, to be researching right now. So that's pretty much what I've been doing. But I guess right now, I guess I can go ahead and interact with the chat. I'm looking, let me just double check my notes to see if I have everything that I wanted to talk about. But pretty much, for those of you who are just joined, what I'm doing is I'm rereading the Bible. And so what I'm going to do is go in order. And every time I finish a book, I'm going to go ahead and bring it to the channel. So we did start the channel discussing elements of narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder, which I do believe is spiritual warfare. And so, awakening to this disorder, realizing that it was some type of spiritual compromise, not really being able to flee from it. This is what kind of brought me back to really understanding or really trying to understand the Bible, because I do believe that once again, there is a deeper meaning when it comes to breaking down these scriptures. And, even right now, the church is promoting, this fig tree generation prophecy, which states that in 1948, Israel became a nation, right? And I do believe that this is some type of psyop, but Israel became a nation. And so from this prophecy, those of us, for people in the church, they were supposed to be raptured by May 14th. And so because a generation is 80, right? And so we would have to be, the doctrine states that we would have to be raptured by May 14th this year in order for the prophecy to be true. And it didn't occur. So once again, I do believe that we have to get back to the drawing board and we have to look at the Bible from a different angle. Because if the Christian church, or members within the Christian church are getting their foundation from an entity, from an arm of, I guess you can say, that great whore of Babylon who sits on many waters. And we understand that the institution had such a hatred for God's chosen people, they're not going to get scripture right. And so, I think that is very important for those of us to try to take it upon ourselves to see if God will open the scrolls and we can figure this stuff out for ourselves, because we do understand that prophecy is happening now, right? And everyone can see that there's some type of shift in the world going on. And once again, the Bible calls it a great deception for a reason. So it's very important to try to sift through this great deception, right? So yeah, let's see what we have going on here in the chat. So yes. And so once again, when it comes to researching this stuff, like I talked about, the 3 books that I was reading last week are the 4 books, and I have a few others on the way. So I have the works of Josephus and coming in, and I think it's going to be great because I found a book that was actually written in 1809. So it'll be very interesting to see this historian's interpretation of what went on during the time of Yeshua, right? So I think he came in a little bit later, but I do believe that his work is going to help bridge the gap so that we can, try to, figure out the deception, I guess you can say. And then I also have a book. It's actually by a rabbi of European descent, and it's actually called The Invention of the Jewish People, right? So it will be nice to see another author's take on the creation of, this race that we have now in Israel, and to see if there's any flaws when it comes to that, right? And why has the identity of, if he's correct, why has the identity of the descendants within the 12 tribes, why has that identity been hidden? And with understanding this, what can we unlock when it comes to understanding the scripture? So let's see here. But yes, hopefully everyone is doing well in the chat. This is once again a new series that I'll be embarking on, and it's a little different than what we normally do on the channel. But When it comes to really discussing narcissistic abuse or narcissistic personality disorder, concepts of gang stalking, there's only so much that you can talk about, right? And because it is spiritual warfare, for those of us who are enduring this type of abuse, it's kind of an ongoing thing, right? And what's interesting for those of us who pay attention to the pattern and aren't afraid to be alone, when it comes to going no contact with these various entities, you really start to see, in the spiritual realm, how the devil will move through people that you do have contact with. So let's just say people that you didn't have any problems with in the past. Now you start to have problems with them because you've kind of you've limited the abuse from the other people, right? Or you set more boundaries, and so now the devil's has formed a new way to get his hands on you, right? So it's very interesting to study, right? Something that I'm really seeing occur now in my life, right? And I do believe, when it comes to being a targeted individual or gang stalking, I believe that it's all spiritual, and that's why everything synchronizes so smoothly. Um, because pretty much the devil will manifest through people, and that's another thing that I want to cover. You'll see in various points of the Bible where people are actually possessed by the devil, right? So King Tyre was one, Judas was another one. Um, you could argue that Esau was another one. Um, I don't know if I mentioned Cain, but he was one. And so, once again, there's this theme of the devil working through people. And so, for those of us dealing with spiritual warfare now, we have to realize that if the person doesn't have the Spirit of God within them, then they can be a tool used by the devil, right, to pretty much attack us, right? So the spiritual realm is just as real as the physical realm, right? And it's very important, to see it from that lens as well. So let's see. I hear somebody said it seems similar to Games of Thrones. Yeah, honestly, and what's interesting about entertainment or the different things that we see on these various TV shows, video games, movies, and all forms of entertainment. Sometimes we hear it in songs. I really do believe that these various mediums are influenced by the spiritual realm, right? So some by the good realm, and then some other by the demonic realm. And I do believe this is why we get such similar stories. And I also believe that these dark entities use the Bible as a script, right? To manipulate their own type of doctrine or um meaning within a show, right? So when you look at the story of Esau and his brother, you can almost think of the Lion King, right, where you had like Mufasa and Scar, right? It's very interesting. Or like when I thought about recently the story of Cinderella, right? So you had somebody who was of royalty, but she was in servitude, you know, and treated similar to the likes of a slave for a short period of time before she came back to the throne. And going back to the Game of Thrones, I didn't really watch it, but it looks like there's a battle between houses or kingdoms, and yeah, you definitely see that there, right? So as we talked about earlier, the we saw it within Cain and Abel for sure, and then we also saw it later on down the line when it came to Esau and Jacob, and then from Joseph and his siblings, right? 10 of his siblings. So once again, there, and I do believe that these represent the forces of good versus evil. And yeah, and it seems like, it's especially when it comes to the line of Esau, it seems like they almost fight amongst each other. And so we see these various powers in society today. They seem to battle it out for who can be number one. And this is where we get these global wars going on, right? And so even when it comes to the emergence of this new world system, I do believe that the American empire will fall or implode, and this will give rise to, I'm guessing, Eastern empires. So the power is taken away from the West, and this will give rise to the various powers within the East. And this is why we see what's going on in the in Russia right now, and within the other country that I shall not name. But pretty much they're duking it out. Um, and, you know, I guess the beast is fighting within itself for, you know, mainstream dominance, right? So very, 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 very interesting. It says, I like how this Bible study is starting from the beginning. Yeah, you know, the Bible, oh my God, it's a very interesting book. And, you know, for people who are new in the faith, you know, I've been in the faith, you know, since I was a child, and I grew up studying the Bible. Um, and it's a very interesting book, and how you go about studying it. You have so many questions. You know, you're asking yourself whether or not this story is literal, or is it symbolic, or is it both, or is it describing, you know, a point in history, and then in a point in the future, is it also going to be describing the same thing, right? So does it have dual meanings? And you know, it's very interesting. And then of course within the Bible you have so many different translation. And I want to say the ESV version is kind of like a scholarly updated version of the King James. So the jargon, the word choices are going to be a lot easier to understand, especially when it comes to reading the Old Testament. And what's interesting, with the Bible, the New Testament is written in Greek, and then the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. And so this is why I think I, you know, had a more difficult time when it came to understanding the Old Testament, you know, because it once again, it really focuses a lot on lineage. So it'll be so and so begot so and so begot so and so, and then you got to pronounce the names. And yeah, it's a, you know, it's a lot. But I do believe I know the New Testament pretty well. And so I believe that if I can go back and study the Old Testament, then I can understand the New Testament better, right? And since we're living in the age of the New Testament, you know, maybe I can therefore understand how to crack this prophetic code, right? Because once again, there's so much deception out there, but we all know that something is on the rise. We can definitely see the dragon working, right? So yeah, let's see here. I'm just looking through some of these comments. And shout out to all of you in the chat. We have Tess in the house, Wendy's in the house, Rachel's in the house. Is it a Magilla Gorilla is in the house? A dog named Boo is in the house. I don't know if I said Cindy already, but shout out to all of you. Blue's in the house. Yeah, and is let's see here. All right, but yeah, so let's see what we have in the chats. But yeah, I wanted to get on here like right after I read it, so I just finished it today, and you know, I want to get on here and discuss it with you all because you know I figured that I'll forget, right? But the book, it's so beautiful, right? Like when Joseph reunited with his father Jacob. It was such a beautiful story, and it's very symbolic of just our relationship with the Father. You know, so it seems like we lost our connection with the Father, and we really do have to battle it out to regain that connection. I do believe this is why, you know, there's some of us in this reality who are attacked the way that we are because we are fighting to stay to hold on to that connection, right? And so you know, we have issues of, you know, we're born into sin, so all of us stumble. And of course, the world does a really great job at distracting us, at lying to us, at deceiving us, at abusing us. And you know, a lot of us are just so caught up in our day-to-day lives that we forget, you know, to really work on, you know, our spiritual health, or, you know, our spiritual relationship with the Father. Because, you know, the life that we live on this planet is very temporary, and we could lose it at any time, right? So a lot of us are experiencing loved ones all around us who are dying, and some individuals who are dying under mysterious circumstances, right? So like even within the fitness community, a lot of people are dropping and no one knows why. Even with you know, the younger children now, they're reporting, you know, liver damage, right? So obviously something is coming where the devil is doing everything in his power via his descendants to maintain control, right? And once again, this relates to narcissism because everything that narcissists create eventually implodes, right? So the narcissist lacks morality, they lack ethics, they lack structure. And because they lack this foundation, um, everything that they have, it seems like they have to move really fast to benefit from it, or to attain financial gain before their systems explode, right? Because they're self-centered. And it really comes when it comes to the mindset of these people, they don't really think ahead too well. And everything that they do is by the sword, right? So this is why, as I want to say, Isaac predicted, right, in the Bible. And so what's funny is you see these same characteristics today, right? It's like, well, I'm going to take what you have by force. And yeah, let's see here. Let's see. But yeah, shout out to all of you here today. We're just hanging out. I guess now will be like our after show portion. But and right now I'm actually like flipping through the book of Genesis to see what else is going on here. And there's a lot of twin symbolism in the book of Genesis. I think it was either 2 or 3 times where we had a set of twins that were born. Um and Once again, this concept of keeping the bloodline pure, and then of course having the bloodline mixed in, and that with the Nephilim DNA is also pretty interesting as well. Let's see here. Just flipping. So you got the 12 tribes, and once again, so there's a verse in Genesis. So it's Genesis chapter, let me see. I want to say chapter 37, verse 9. And this is our verse 9. So it says, then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, the 11 stars bowing down to me. Right. And so once again, this is representing, the stars represent the brothers, who are the 12 tribes. And when you go back to the book of Revelation, it talks about a woman. I want to say she was clothed in the sun and she had a crown of 12 stars. So once again, by understanding the book of Genesis, you can thus break down the book of Revelation. Let's see here. All right. Seeing if there's any notes that are worth mentioning. All right. I think that's fine. All right, let me see what you all are saying. Okay. But yeah, so it's very interesting, right? And then, what about the serpent seed? Is it possible that we could have another race of people that look like us, that walks amongst us, right? Um, and a lot of people will talk about the tribe of Dan. So that's definitely something that I'm going to pay attention to in my reading. We also have the descendants of Esau, and then we have the Nephilim, right? Which the descendants of Esau mixed with. Now, could that still be going on today? Possibly, because this was after the Great Flood, right? So very interesting. And for those of you who've done your DNA, they talk about the concept of Neanderthal DNA. And so I'm like, what is that referring to? Is the Neanderthal, a Nephilim? I don't know. But what's also interesting about that too is, so Esau came out with like red hair all over his body, right? So I do believe that there was something going on with the human gene pool. And so he might have had that DNA in him from his mother's side. And I want to say back in, it was from the times of 2006 to 2013, they found one of these giants. I want to say it was like in Iraq. It was somewhere over there, and on in a mountain. And they said he was about 10 feet tall, but he had like this red hair. And red hair, red dragon, you have the Scarlet Woman, and I don't know, something to ponder. And what was also interesting is, you know, the devil is almost, well, the devil has his counterfeits, right, to God's ultimate design. And so you have the devil, or the dragon, and then you have the woman, who, the harlot or the whore, which is likened to like the woman, and then you have the descendants of Esau, right? Which I guess you can say is the antagonist to, I guess, let me see. I was going to say the Holy Spirit, but I might be off on that one. But yeah, so let's see here. Okay. How are you? Hopefully all is well. I want to pronounce your name, but I'm scared I'm going to say it wrong. So all right, let's see here. I'll just call you Miss Styles. But hopefully all is going well. And so you're kind of on the same journey as I am as far as really trying to understand, exactly what the book is talking about, right? And really just trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So another thing is I'm trying to find research that is in my current, in the current age, and then work my way backwards. And hopefully, through divine intervention, I can work my way back further enough to the time of Christ. And then from there, we have the Bible. And so that's going to be till the beginning of time. So that's what I'm trying to do, right? To try to really break free from this deception. Yeah. So it says, Monkey Bear Max says Christians differ on fig tree prophecy. Yes. And what's kind of annoying about, the church is a lot of these prophecies are what's discussed in the Bible. It's already broken down for you. So you don't have the ability to find your own interpretation. And so I think this is why the church keeps getting things wrong when it comes to different prophetic dates, because they're relying on a philosophy that was given to them. And so what you'll see with a lot of the watchmen out there is the dates just keep getting pushed back, right? So and we've really saw an uptick in this. I want to say back in 2017, and another high watch day was supposed to be um May 14th, which was yesterday, and since so now it's going to get pushed back even further, right? So to sometime in June. And so this is why I feel that not only do we have to look at the Bible from all angles, but it's really important for us to come together and really try to understand all points of view. And so I do believe that when you understand who the descendants of the tribes of Israel are, then it gives a different take, right? Which is something that the church definitely does not offer, right? So the church says that these people don't matter, they don't exist. But what I'm starting to find in my research is that yes, these people do exist, right? It's a part of the prophecy that was given, from God to Abraham. Um, and they walk amongst us today, right? So, and once again, this reawakening is a part of Bible prophecy, which of course the devil is trying to prevent. All right, you all. So let's see. We've been on here for an hour and 15 minutes. I think I've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to discuss today. It was kind of an impromptu live stream, but I just wanted to get on here and say, hey, I know I've kind of fallen back from YouTube. I'm kind of changing my, I guess you can say, the angle that I want to take the channel. We'll discuss things such as narcissism later on, but once again, I can only talk about that stuff so much, right? It's something that I want to bring more light to the channel. I don't want I don't want to focus my attention on darkness, even though I do believe that it's very important, especially for individuals in the faith, to understand the dark realms, the dark side, so that you can protect yourself against it. It shouldn't be the only thing that we talk about, right? But it is very important to understand the tactics of the enemy, so that when you are attacked in real time, um, then you're able to once again safeguard yourself and identify it. And so that was the reason why I decided to bring narcissism to the channel, was because I wanted you to see the tactics of the enemy, because it's very similar across the board, no matter if the narcissist is in Africa or if the narcissist is in Asia. They use the same tactics. To me, they remind me a lot of robots. And so when you understand the characteristics and the tactics that they use, you'll be able to identify them. Thus, you'll be able to identify the spiritual entity that is designed to destroy your life, right? And so, once again, it's very important to be able to pick up on this, because the devil will bend and mold himself to anything that you think you desire. And I believe the reason why a lot of people who have grown up in narcissistic families, have such a hard time of coming to terms with the tactics of the enemy is because they fear being alone. And if you aren't still, then and you're distracted, you won't realize how the enemy is morphing itself to find a way into your life. And so that's one thing that I've come to realize over, I guess you can say, like the last 2 years, since this lockdown or since this pandemic, is how the enemy will bend and morph itself to find a way in my life. And it's almost as if, I discussed earlier in the channel how when I wasn't aware of what narcissism was or how these demons affected my life, they would toy with me, right? And they would just do things. They would pretty much set me up, play me, and I would be deceived and aloof to the tactics. And so, I would be blindsided and completely shocked, and I wouldn't understand what happened. And so now, since I know what to look for, they have their very, these demons have their various ways of letting me know that they're watching, right? And letting me know, letting me know, that they're doing, this or that in my life. And it is just so interesting. I'm like, how did I make it all this time? Not realizing what was happening to me, right? Um, and what's also interesting is how I'm not fearful of it, right? But it's just something that I've just kind of accepted, right? Because this is a sign of the times that we are living in, right? It's this antichrist spirit manifesting, right? So let's see here. Yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, it's fine, Blue. Um, yeah, I was, it's cool. Hopefully work is going well for you. Okay, so it says I'm unlearning everything I need to learn as a Christian and rereading the Sefer. The King James version is questionable, right? And there was actually an argument. Well, there was arguments, going against who this king was, right? The King James version for me, it's just I think I was before that I was reading the New King James version. Um, but yeah, I do think that it's I guess we just have to get all versions and just like cross reference, right? So I have the King James 1611 version, and then I also have the New King James version, of course, the Sefer, and then the ESV version. And so if there's something that I ever question, I'll just go back and reference it from the other books. But what's interesting about the Sefer is I do believe the books that were taken out were done so intentionally. And so there's a lot of history in the book of Maccabees. So I'm going to be looking at that history. So it's going to talk about these various wars between the Roman nations, right? And which, of course, birthed Christianity. So I think that's why they took it out so that you're not able to identify the people. But yeah, so that is interesting. I do believe it's important, right? So like a lot of us, we're so prideful that we don't want to accept the fact that everything that we learn could have been some form of manipulation. I believe the reason why people are attracted to the Bible is because it is the truth, right? And we can feel it in our souls. But because it's been manipulated, even though we have the truth in our hand, we don't understand it. And so we're unable to break it down because the foundation, once again, we're misled, right? Because, you know, we don't know the identity of the people, right? So of course we can understand the stories on a deeper level. Let's see. End times topics get depressing. I need to limit what I watch. Yes, and that's another thing too. Yes, 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 yes. Rachel, you said it. When it comes to this stuff, it's like I don't, people will ask, okay, well, where have you been? Why aren't you on the channel? And it's like there's so much BS going on in the world. It's like, what do you all, like with the people who complain, it's like, well, do you want me to get on here and talk about it? So every time the news has something negative to say, I just go ahead and parrot, what they say. And a lot of what they're saying is some type of is either fulfilling some type of agenda or it's manipulation with lies. So if they lie to us 90% of the time, why would I bring something on the channel that everyone's triggered by, because that most likely is a lie or fulfilling some type of agenda. And once again, it's from that spirit of Esau, right? Like it's that demonic spirit, right, which is really breaking down the population so that it can control the population. And when you're motivated by fear, then you're less motivated to lead in love. And I do believe that, it's a part of one of the commandments, right? To love our neighbors like ourselves, right? But if we don't love ourselves, how can we love our neighbors? And then it's like, how can we love ourselves if we're scared all the time and fearful all the time, which the news is really great at, right? And sometimes you have to detox from it, right? So it looks like the wildfires here in California are going to pick back up. That's depressing. And then of course we have this war. We're still in this pandemic, really not knowing really the outcome of what it's going to be long term wise, right? Then of course a lot of us here are either people in the faith or are victims of narcissistic abuse, right? And so I can get, I don't want to keep getting on here, speaking of the abuse. A lot of us who have gone through it, we know it. We know it like the back of our hands. Right. So, I think now, in addition to everything that's going on in the world, we have to center ourselves. We have to work on building up our self-esteem, work on healing from various traumas, whether it was in childhood or adulthood, and work on building our relationship with the creator, right? Because there's a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing out here. And, for those of us who have light in us, it's like, okay, well, I at least want to die knowing that I'm trying to do something right. Right. But yeah, this time has been, a period of like self-reflection. And once again, what can I do to be that light, or what can I do to better myself? What can I do that gives me purpose? And for somebody who is a Bible believer, once again, I think that it's important, to at least try. Right, I may not be able to teach it, but I can bring my findings to the channel, because the book is very intimidating, right? Especially when you never read it before. So, and yeah, and kind of give my take on it, because I do believe, once again, it's important. Let's see here. Yes. Yeah. And so, the pre-trib rapture doctrine is interesting. One second. And that's another reason why I wanted to get into scriptures and start understanding it for myself, because I've prayed about the pre-trib rapture. I've never had a pre-trib rapture dream. I've had an end times dream, but it was not a pre-trib rapture dream. But this doctrine, once again, you get it from the church, right? And so the church is telling you, well, what he meant to say was this, and then this means this, right? And so that's why I wanted to start the book off from the beginning, to understand when it's talking about the what is it, 12 virgins, or one in the field and another is taken. What is that alluding to, right? And so this is why it's important to understand the context. And so now, in my opinion, that I know the people that the Bible was talking about, now I have to do the history around those people, right? So find secondary resources so that I can better understand what these prophecies are actually talking about, because of course it was written in a certain period of time. And so the way we interpret it today may be different than how it was interpreted back then, right? And this is why, once again, I think that we have to all do our due diligence when it comes to studying the word for ourselves. Because even when it comes to worshiping these various holidays, a lot of them are unbiblical, right? And which will prove that, a lot of the stuff that we practice in the church is a byproduct of the enemy, right? So Christmas should not be celebrated. Easter should not be celebrated. But we like to water things down, and we like to tell ourselves, well, we'll just give it a new meaning and it's fine because everybody else does it. But when it comes to, walking on this narrow path, you will see, even when the Messiah was down here, that his walk was not like the world's walk, right? He was separated. And because of that, he was ostracized, right? But he was the example. And so we have to at least strive to be, like the example. Let's see. Okay, so everything you spoke about is what I've learned recently. I'm happy you are doing Bible studies. Yeah, it's I'm kind of excited about it, because what I'm doing, my time off work and just being in school right now, it's like I'm taking my time with the Bible, and it can be a beautiful book if you take your time with it, and you can just see the various principles that the Lord is trying to teach us. And man reuniting with his son, which is symbolic of us reuniting with the creator, and the creator never leaving us, right? So even when you see some of the unfortunate things that has happened to various individuals in the Bible, God was using those things to force the person to wake up, right? To strengthen the person's faith or relationship with him, right? And so even though these things, even though there's characters in the Bible who suffered, it was for the greater good, right? And if, even in this life now, like if we didn't go through suffering, we wouldn't need, the creator, and um then sometimes we can think that we can do it all, right? So this is this whole phenomenon that we are God, right? But we're not God because if we like we don't even have mortality, right? Or immortality. So it's I do believe that we have to humble ourselves, right? And once again, we are so far removed from the scriptures, even though the scriptures are talking about the same things that we're going through in our own lives. And so it's very interesting how even by starting with the book of Genesis, it's already prophesying about the end, right? So it's oh my god, it's yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so my boyfriend doesn't like watching end time stuff because he says it's doom and gloom. Yeah, and I believe it as well, but I also believe that we can't run away from the truth, right? And once again, if something triggers us, we have to ask ourselves why. And if there's something that you can do on your end, um, do it. Like, so for instance, right? So I grew up in a very traumatic, I had a very traumatic childhood, right? Which is, it's kind of similar to the curses that I want to say, is it the book of Genesis talks about? But pretty much taken away from my parents, and I liken to being adopted to being sold into slavery because it was basically like slavery. But anyway, um, when stuff scares me, then it's like, okay, well, I have to understand why. And when you do the work on yourself, you'll realize that you're not motivated by the element of fear. So like we live in you know unpredictable times now, right? So the future can be scary, but when we've gone through healing and recovering from various traumas that you had as a child, you won't be as scared, and then you can step into a position of power, right? So when I was a codependent, thinking that the world was going to end back in 2014, I was very terrified. And now I'm like, I don't want to jinx myself, but I'm like, bring it, right? Um, so it's very interesting, but I would say, when it comes to that, we have a lot of people who are very addicted to that genre or the doom and gloom or end times. And then they get lost in it. And some people, they're not the healthiest. So it causes some people to spiral out of control, right? And some may be disordered, right? And this is why, it's very important to have some type of balance. Like, you want to know what's going on, but you don't want to be consumed by it. You don't want to be lost in it. And what's interesting is, you follow another channel that I'm actually a moderator for. And, during the time, like, I'm reading the comments and some of these people, they sound so like disordered. Like, you'll read some of the comments and you're like, oh my God, I don't know if you should be looking into this stuff now because it's making you crazy. um and it's very interesting, right? To look at that type of stuff. Okay, so I feel better detoxifying channels that focus on the negatives. Yeah. And yeah, yeah. And you see it even within the narcissistic abuse recovery community. Some people, they want it to be doom and gloom. They want you to be the victim. Some people will send me messages and say, you're too positive for everything that you're talking about, so you must be an imposter. I'm like, no, I'm trying to show you that you can get over this, right? um but some people just want to stay there, right? And we've kind of what is I was going to use the term procured, but we've cultivated a society that they it almost teaches society to be a victim. And so if you're a victim, you're disempowered, and therefore you're more easily to be controlled. And the reason why the Bible is important is it gives you a sense of identity. It gives you a sense of purpose. It shows you that you were loved, that you do have a creator, that you are important, that your life's important. And when you could step into that power, you won't allow the world to belittle you, right? So if the world's like, hey, I need you to put this in your body, You're like, no, I'm not putting that in my body. If the world feels comfortable lying to you, you know how to spot out a liar. You're like, that's a lie, which is a tool of Satan. So no, I'm not going to believe you on that. I'm not going to trust you on that. Right. So yeah, all of us, everybody here on the chat and people who will listen to this live stream later, you are valuable. And the world doesn't want you to believe that. The world wants you to believe that you come from nothing, that your life is, you live life for experiences and then you die on and there's nothing afterwards. But that is so far from the truth, which is why the devil has his hand in all sectors of society to keep you from coming to this knowledge. But yes, it says don't forget about the Holy Spirit. Yes, and so the Holy Spirit will guide you, right? So even when it comes to this channel, my level of discernment, I'm able to see stuff and really tap into my intuition because of the Holy Spirit. So, like, if, say, for example, if somebody on the channel is performing witchcraft on me, I'm able to catch it. Or if somebody sends me an email trying to bait me into a fight with another content creator, I'm able to catch it. Right. So, I do believe that it's a lot easier to understand spiritual warfare when you do have, a high level of discernment. Right. Because, unfortunately, there's quite a few people, within these YouTube realms who really don't have our best interests at heart, especially because we're exposing who they are. And so what they do is they try to intentionally get us to react, right? So that they can turn around and say that we're the abuser. So the psychology of these people is very interesting, but I do believe that they're just a tactic used by the devil. Let's see. I'm not relying on the pre-check rapture to happen. We are still here. Yeah, going back to the rapture theory. Okay, what can I say about this? I think okay. And to those of you listening, try not to get offended by this, but I think it's very narcissistic to think that we can just flee from everything, right? So like even when you look at the concept of the narcissist starts fires everywhere and they flee from them. They never take accountability. And so when you think that you will just be pulled out of a situation, before, let's just say, it gets bad, right? And I do believe that it will come in the future, but it's probably not as close as we think it is. But to think that God will just pull you out of a situation and you don't have to endure anything, I think that it's narcissistic. Like I really think that, for individuals who have had a comfortable life, who have dismissed groups of people who have may not have had the easiest life, and just to think that God's going to just pull you out, um, and you don't have to endure anything, is quite narcissistic. And it's almost as if the devil has manipulated, that doctrine, for people to think that they won't have to experience any hardships, right? And so, when it comes to understanding the scriptures, I do think that we have to humble ourselves and realize, maybe, because I do believe that there is going to be a catching away period, but maybe realizing that the doctrines that we've believed in so deeply for so long are manipulated one way or another, right? So even going back to who are the chosen people that the book talks about, if we have people within the faith who are like, we don't care about those people, they're not important, we're not going to acknowledge them. It's like, how do you think God is just going to, give you the grace to flee a situation when you disrespect his chosen? So once again, I do believe that we have to come to the Bible with all angles. And because, the Bible talks about this strong delusion and this great deception, this has been in the work for centuries, right? The devil has been doing everything in his power to pull us away from the creator for centuries. So if we keep, going about it in one way and we keep getting it wrong, then there has to be some type of new approach. Like, so this is just for me personally. Um, you know, no one ever really had to tell me that God existed, right? It was something that was in my soul. I always knew. And then my abuse brought me closer to the creator because I needed the creator in order to survive just the chaos that I was going on in my life as a little boy. Um, and I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that? Let's see. So when it comes to understanding the Bible, or my familiarity with the Bible, something that I've learned since I was a child, right? And but realizing that maybe, humbling myself and realizing, okay, maybe I'm wrong about a few things, then that will give me, leeway to look at it from another angle. There was something else that I wanted to say about that, but I I can't remember. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of pride within the community and unwillingness to look at things or accept things from a certain angle. And this is why we keep getting these things wrong. Let's see here. From what I learned so far, it looks like the rapture happens at the seventh trumpet. But then again, I'm relearning. Yes. So yeah, I once again I'm relearning with you, right? I'm right in there with you, Tess. Um, you know, like right in there, right? Let's see here. Yeah, it's not good to think that the world is ending tomorrow. Setting goals is important and keeping yourself motivated and living. Yes. And then once again, if we're the light of the world, we have to be the example. So if we're just scared and we're, like, kind of sitting up waiting for, crap to hit the fan, then how can we be a light to others? Right. So if I was sitting here and I'm like, oh my God, the Lord was supposed to take me away yesterday and he didn't, then I wouldn't be motivated to get on the channel, right? And say, okay, we got to look at this from a different angle. We got to figure it out, right? Um, and I know I was going to say something like the devil has been at this for a long time, right? This strong delusion and this great deception. And as you start digging, it's almost as, with having this with being a Bible believer, there's levels to it, right? So, you start off as a new believer and you kind of learn the principles of morality, of ethics, of God's plea to mankind and him sending the Messiah to be the example. Oh, I know what I was going to say now, right? So to be the example, and then from there you'll realize that there's a lot of doctrine that is false, right? When you start doing your own study, right? And within the Christian church there's just so much deception, right? So you have so many different doctrine, you have, so many branches of Christianity, and so a new believer will just hop from one belief to the next, to the next, trying to find their tribe. And I believe that that's, these various religious institutions, I believe that that's a part of the deception, right? um and then once again, this is why it's important to study the books that were taken out of the Bible, right? And to understand the relationship between God's people and the Romans, and then who are the Romans a byproduct of, and then who are branches from the Roman, right? But anyway, so what I was going to say, going back, so I've always known what the Bible was, right? And I've always studied it. Of course, my interpretations were wrong, and I've humbled myself to know that. But now, within my faith, I'm at a part of my faith now where I want to try to go back and start studying, and learning the traditions, of course, the commandments and the laws. And I want to try to live my life that way to see if, like, maybe then my life, if I don't, maybe then my spiritual warfare could be lessened. I guess you can say that, right? Because the Christian church teaches you that the laws aren't important. So Christ came and he took on all that. So we don't have to worry about that. All we have to do is believe. And I don't think that's the case. I think we have to actually at least try, right? I don't believe that. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter what I believe. It's what the Bible says, which is why I'm rereading it. But um obviously what I'm doing isn't working. So I need to do more, right? So I think it's more than just believing in God, believing that God is just going to pull me away from a really bad situation. I do believe that if Christ was down here, if Yeshua was down here and he was living and he was practicing these feast days and he was practicing these commandments and these laws, I'm like, well, why can't I just try? Right? I know it's going to be difficult and I know that I'm going to fail, really badly, but I want to try because obviously what I'm doing in my personal life, it's not working, right? And um, obviously because the enemy is after me the way he is, via so many methods, it's like I have to really strengthen myself, um, and do something better, right? So I forget who said it, but if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and failing, or not getting the result that you want, that's insanity, right? Expecting a different result, that's insanity. And it's like, okay, well, I've been in the faith since I was a child. I've always known who the creator was. I've listened to what the church has told me, but I'm not getting the answers or, the lifestyle that I want, right? And when it comes to, I guess you can say, the lifestyle, it's not about materialism with me, but it's about really being able to conquer spiritual warfare and even my shortcomings, right? Because we're all sinners, but I do believe that there were people in the Bible who were very pleasing to God, right? So obviously they had mastered the concept of, not doing what the world is doing. And so, I feel like I'm at that part of my walk, right? Because there is levels to it, where I'm like, okay, we gotta level up. um, so yeah, but I do believe for those of you new to the faith, learn as much as you can. I do believe that the church is really good at giving you the foundation, and then from there, um, you can branch off, right? So I don't really want to, what is it? What's the word that I'm looking for? I don't want to um pull people away from the church. But I do believe that, get what you need there. And then as you grow within your walk, then once again, level up your game as well. Right. But this also comes with studying. Right. And so once again, you will start to see the contradictions between what the church teaches and what the Bible teaches. All right, let's see here. No problem. Anytime. Anytime. I was raised Christian. I was raised in a Christian home. Oh, that's another thing. You just sparked something. Okay, so I was raised in a Christian home. I had to ask the church for a Bible, as I didn't have one. This embarrassed my parents. I remember going to the church instead of Sunday after that. I remember going to a big church instead of Sunday school after that. Yeah, and so what's also interesting with that, right? So like I grew up, like I always say, I grew up in a narcissistic family, but they claim to be Christian. They claim to be of the Christian faith. And what you'll notice in a lot of these church houses is a lot of people go there to maintain this false image that they have. So I'm not going to actually be a good person, but I'm going to portray myself as a good person so that the community can value me, right? And so once again, when it comes to doing things that seem innocent, like in your case, asking for a Bible, this is something that embarrassed your parents because they're trying to maintain this false image. And so you'll realize that a lot of people who claim to be believers aren't really believers. But then you could even take that on a deeper level, like when you realize that Christianity may be a branch of the devil, then you'll be like, oh, I see why. Because my family, all they believed in was lies. They never really believed in the truth, right? I couldn't even use the term lie growing up when they would lie on me all the time. But the same thing happened. My adopted father passed away. I asked, they wanted each sibling to pay a certain amount for the funeral expenses. I asked the church to help me out with this. This deeply enraged my narc sister because it was kind of like, she created this illusion that she had it, financially. And so, of course, because of that false image, the pastor of the church, which he may have been on the cluster B too, but he assumed that I was asking for the money to use it for myself, right? Because my family had been giving money to the church, a tremendous amount of money to the church, while I had grown up. And so, I kind of went, by asking for money, he was kind of like, wait, why would you need to ask for money for this? And of course, because the false image that my adopted family had procured was, the believable, I looked like the shady person. So yeah, and it was so crazy because my adopted sister didn't even talk to me for a while after that. I'm like, what did I do wrong? Right. I was like in my early 20s at the time. Okay, so I went to a big adult church. And you know what's also interesting about the church? A lot of abusers will use your yearning to have a relationship with God against you. So you'll have a lot of abusers who will become prominent leaders within the church just so that they could um, find a population to abuse, right? So you'll see a lot of these various cult leaders coming out of these various religious organizations. It's not just Christianity, but a lot of them do, and a lot of them will get stuck in these Christian cults. Um, and so once again, this is why it's very important to realize, to understand traits of abusers, so you're not deceived by them, right? So when you think everybody in the world, let's just say you believe yourself to be a good person, if you believe that everybody in the world thinks and operates like you will get played so much, right? And then a lot of people will believe, but it's the Bible, it's a church, they would never do that. And I'm here to tell you, yes, they will. Yes, they will. And these people can live, a life of chaos and portray themselves to be, God-fearing people. And the day that they die, they will go down as saints when they were like literally descendants from the devil himself. So let's see here. I went to a big church with my parents, and one day during worship, I raised my hand and my mother glared at me. Oh, that glare. Oh, I know that glare, right? It made her angry, I believe. I've always had that connection, and it makes them mad. Yeah, they can't stand our spiritual connection. And I think this is why, there's those of us who get more abused than others, because they can see that we do have that connection, right? And they lack it. They truly do lack it. I always read the Bible in private. When I was hiding from her, I always had a crawl space in my closet, hide it from her in rage. Yeah. So it's so funny because my childhood was similar to yours. I would have to hide my books between my mattress and the bed frame because they didn't want me reading. But then they complained about me not reading. So it was weird. But yeah. Yeah. Um, but yeah. Okay. So let's see here. I think we've been here on here for about 2 hours. So I think what I'm going to do is close out the show, and I'll probably be back on here discussing something. But the next book that we'll cover is the Book of Exodus. And I may be on here discussing something else sooner than that. But yeah, it was a pleasure having all of you here. I hope that you all have a beautiful Sunday, and I will talk to you next time. Right. Yeah, I have people who follow me who don't really care for me, but that's the story of my life. So with that said, let me play out some music and we will go ahead and get up out of here. But God bless you all, and hopefully you all, take care in this hectic world that we live in. Have a great one. Bye.